So let's summarize today's session by discussing some of the principal mistakes that should be avoided. The first mistake that promoters often make is that they take complete charge of all the operations. This should be avoided at all costs because this is not a scalable model. And the mindset of the promoter is not of doing service to the members of the cooperative. The mindset of the promoter is to enable members to come together and run their own business. So if the promoter is not to take charge, then in the initial stages itself, the promoter has to ensure that members are very much engaged in all aspects of the operations. For instance, when the produce is brought into the village cooperative, the members and their representatives have to take charge of weighing the produce, assessing the quality, doing the financial transactions, issuing the receipts to the members, loading it into a godown or onto the transport, taking it to the markets, negotiating with the buyers and taking the payment from the buyers, bringing it back to the village and dispersing it to each and every member. This cycle of operations, the promoter's task is to ensure that members are capable of doing it. This is just an example. On the other hand, one often sees that in their zeal to do good to the poor, whether it's the government or the NGOs, they take care of all the operations and the member is just reduced to bringing his produce into the cooperative, taking a receipt and going home. Happy, but he has no role to play in the operations. That mistake needs to be avoided. So promoter should not take charge of operations. The second mistake that's often made is that you allow the costs to build up. You see examples again and again of promoters investing a lot of money in fixed costs, land, buildings, equipment, transport sometimes, borrowing huge amounts of money from various financial institutions to pay the members. All this adds up to the costs and eventually you end up sometimes making big losses and then you say, well, this is not working, and then you try to close it down. Yeah, so there is a simple principle that one can use to figure out what kind of costs are important and what kind of costs one should simply avoid. And that is asking a question, if it was my money, would I spend it like this or would I do it differently? When you're out there promoting cooperatives, you have access to funds and grants and loans from various organizations and agencies. You're really not spending your own money and therefore you're not careful with the way you are using the finances. So the mistake to be avoided is that keep the costs low in the early days, ensure that you start getting member benefits and profits from day one, and it's possible. The third mistake that again and again you see in the field when people are setting up cooperatives is providing inducements and incentives to attract members so that they will join the cooperative. Of course, in the first season you will see spectacular growth. So for instance, if the market value of the produce is 100 and as a promoter you have access to a large amount of external funds and you go in there and tell the farmers that instead of 100 I will pay 110, of course you will get thousands and thousands of farmers who will come and very happily give their produce and you will show spectacular growth. The problem is that this is not sustainable because unless you have ensured that the markets are there and if you are not able to make a profit in the first year, then you are in deep trouble. So the second problem is that you may not be able to provide these inducements every year because the donors and do-gooders who are supporting you as a promoter may not be willing to provide these inducements every year. And the third and most important issue is that this is not scalable, because if you want to really reach a very, very large number of farmers, this idea of providing some incentive or inducement to get people to join is very difficult. And lastly, I would say, what is it that we are trying to do? We are trying to build a cooperative not for 1 year. We are trying to build a cooperative that will run for 20, 50 or 100 years. So that can only happen if the members take charge and they own up the cooperative and they run the business with your help initially and later on their own. But once you make them habituated to inducements, the guys who already got it will expect it. Next year, when you go to the nearby villages, they'll say, well, you gave them all these inducements, why don't you give it to us? And you are stuck in a catch-22 situation. So therefore, another mistake to be avoided is that somehow or the other we must provide some inducements to attract a large number of members. So it all boils down finally to one simple thing. Who owns a cooperative in the long run? In the long run, it is very clear it is owned by the members. We should build that principle of owned by the members from day one. And that can be done by giving them charge of operations, by ensuring that they invest not only their time and effort, but also their money into the cooperative. That gives real ownership to the members and to the cooperative as a whole.